I confess it took me by surprise to see my most popular video so far was called Lazing Around Lismore in My Inflatable Cabin Cruiser. It had 44,000 views. I don't think it was because it was a video about Lismore, even though it is a stunning location. I suspect the words inflatable cabin cruiser captured the attention of the Google search algorithms. I have had quite a few comments asking for more information on the tent that I made, which turned my inflatable boat into a tiny cabin cruiser. So to attempt answering them, I have put this video together. If you wonder why I made it, it was in an attempt to escape the many ticks and millions of midges which bite me when using the normal tents and land. For anyone not familiar with these little vampires that drain my blood, ticks are tiny acranoids that burrow their heads into my legs and arms to satisfy their thirst. I seemed to attract them and often found a dozen or more happily feasting after a wild camp in a lovely scenic location. It's not the bite that bothers me as much, although they do cause me to itch terribly. It's the fact that they can carry Lyme disease, which can affect your whole life if you don't get it treated reasonably quickly. Midges are very small mosquito-type flies that descend in the millions during the calm, windless, damp evenings. They don't pass on nasty diseases as far as I know, but their bites do itch terribly, especially as there are so many. I'm delighted to say that sleeping in my boat saved me from the discomfort of such countryside terrors. I never get one tick bite since sleeping in a boat, and midges don't seem to find me anchored 50 metres offshore. It also saves me getting trampled by cows, raped by rampant stags during the rutting season, or gored by goats while I'm sleeping in a conventional tent in the ground. However, it's not a silver bullet to comfortable camping around Scotland's scenic coasts, as I will discuss during the course of the video. My boat tent design was inspired by two things. Before designing the tent layout, I'd been reading about the athletes who row small boats across great oceans. They have small cabins built into the boat's bow, so they can sleep during the multi-day crossings. Sleep may not be the correct term though, and perhaps I should say rest instead of sleep, as I can imagine it will be pretty noisy and uncomfortable getting thrown around a small space in a rowboat on a mighty ocean. Which brings me to one of the disadvantages of my boat tent. Even a gentle lapping wave regularly hitting the hull of the boat can be a noisy experience and keep me awake during the night. Even a small wave can rock my bed in the boat and drive me to drink. To get around these two problems, I try to find sheltered water to moor in. I love it when the sea around me is flat calm all night. Unfortunately, sheltered areas are usually very close to land, and I can't moor too close, as I need to anchor in at least 12 feet deep water. This is because the tides come and go as I sleep, and I quickly found out it's not a good night's kip if the boat grounds before low tide, as I'm kept awake until it refloats again. If the boat is accidentally left high and dry by falling tide, my bed can end up at an uncomfortable angle, especially if it's above a big rock. So you see, I'm spoiled when it's flat calm all night as I get a smooth snooze. If there's a breathe, I call it a slapping sleep. The other thing that inspired my inflatable cabin cruiser design was when I saw a car park up on the beach. The owner then got out and opened his roof box, and with one pull, lo and behold, he then had a tent on his roof. I knew then that I needed to design mine to be as erected as easily. I wanted the tent to be kept in position in the front of the boat even when folded. This is to ensure the sleeping area is dry at all times and stops rain or spray soaking the area as I travel. The tent is hung over a metal frame stretched between the bow canopy and the boat console, which houses my 12-volt battery and all my camera gear. It is clipped to the rubbing strake with elasticated clips, so fixing it in position is quick and easy. The very front of the metal frame is tied securely to the boat to form a hinge, allowing the rear of the frame to be raised after releasing all the elasticated clips. I then hold the rear of the frame in position with another smaller frame, which sits on top of the console. The frame is then tied to the console, forming a rigid and secure tent. Another line of elasticated clips now hold the tent sides to the rubbing strake, and the tent is pitched. It only takes a couple of minutes to do this. I find it far easier and quicker erecting a boat tent than a conventional land tent. Not that I find that much of a task, but every little time saver helps after a long day at sea. Obviously, I need to be able to get in and out the sleeping area and back into the cockpit area when afloat. To accomplish this, I flip the tent side panel over the frame, which allows me to walk an inflatable tube to the rear of the boat. It's easy enough to unclip the tent side from the rubbing strake, just by unclipping the elasticated clips, even while inside the tent. This photo illustrates one of the downfalls of a boat tent compared to a conventional land tent. Space is at a premium. I have to keep everything very tidy and in its designated place, or it could be easy to drop overboard. I move all my kit, which is stored in the sleeping area while travelling, into the cockpit area at night, so even that area is cramped with my gear. The cockpit bimini, which I can raise, lower or remove altogether, keeps my gear dry at night should it rain, and I even have enough room to catch my breakfast mackerel from the rear of the boat. As long as I'm aware it's easy to drop things overboard. I never lost anything last season, well, except a few fish, which escaped at the last moment. When I'm in the boat tent, I have as much room as a conventional 2-man land tent. I'm 5 foot 10 inches tall and can sleep lying flat, as my feet reach the bow of the boat under the canopy, and my head is at the console. I can also sit up straight in bed, as my head and shoulders are in the high part of the tent. I can also easily do a midnight pee sitting up and having my feet touching the floor in the boat, as I sleep on a wooden board above the boat floor. I just extend a plastic tube over the side of the boat and pee down the tube, an essential part of old age camping and slurping gravy before retiring for the night. I don't sleepwalk, which could prove disastrous. I place a self-inflating mat on the wooden board and have a very good down sleeping bag, so I'm very comfortable when tucked up in bed. However, this brings me to another negative of boat tents. Having used mine most of last season, it's great during the nice warm summer nights. But I found in the autumn, especially in very calm but almost freezing cold nights, I get condensation in the tent. Understandable, as I even get it in my land tents. However, because I'm surrounded by cold salt water, it's a bit more in my conventional land tent. The worst part is the bottom of my sleeping bag, where it touches a cold PVC tube at the very bow of the boat. My sleeping bag got quite damp there last September. To hopefully get around that issue, I've made a short waterproof bag and attached it to my sleeping bag with little hoops, so I don't kick it off. Hopefully that will help solve the problem and keep the condensation between the bag and the PVC inflatable tube. However, time will tell. Condensation in the main part of the tent was negligible though, as I have an inner wall inside the tent, similar to a land's tent inner. It's the black material in the photo and works well. Ventilation is also very important, which is why the rear of the tent is always open above the console. Only a bug net covers this area, and that's just in case midges find their way to the boat. As mentioned, I look for very sheltered areas to moor in, and although they are great for a smooth snooze, there is no wind to waft through the boat to dispel any condensation. I'm happy with the setup, I had to air my sleeping kit every day last September, which was not a problem as the weather was so good. However, it would be impossible on damp, rainy days. Returning to the board I sleep on, it's kept at a slight angle and not central in the boat. This is to give more room for my feet to get out the bed, and it also allows the top of my head to be positioned beside the console, so I can sleep lying flat. The illustration shows my sleeping position if that description is not so clear. I store some equipment under the bed in a plastic box, and have a 25-litre fuel tank there too, as well as another 25-litre in the bow locker. I have a third 25-litre tank under the seat in the cockpit area of the boat, and if on a long multi-day trip, I'll also carry another 20-litre container there. So I'm virtually a floating fuel tanker with 95 litres of petrol at the start of my trips, which gives me around 250 to 300 mile range. I keep food and cooking gear and sleeping gear in the space left on the floor on top of the boards. Obviously at night the food and cooking gear are put in the cockpit area, so I have ample room under the tent to be comfortable. I can also open the rear sides of the tent where my head is, to allow more ventilation and warmer evenings. The tent is designed with steep sloping sides and top, so as it sheds rainwater or spray when parked up or travelling. I've been in some choppy seas and happy to report that no water enters the sleeping area. Because room in the boat is so limited and also the amount of petrol on board, I cook my dinners on land and, assuming there are no midges around, prefer to slurp my gravy in a stable surface too. So to make life as easy as possible, I have all my cooking stuff plus a litre of water in a plastic box with a carry strap, which keeps my hands free to carry the food and collapsible camp chair. The cooker is a Primus gas stove, just one ring, but I'm generally only heating food or frying in a pan, so the Primus stove suits my needs well. And although it's not the healthiest of foods, I'm very partial to a fry-up with sausages, shrooms, tomato and egg, washed down with plenty of Guinness gravy. I have been known to boil a pot of coffee water on board, assuming it's flat calm and no wind. It's kept well away from fuel tanks, so hopefully that gives a good insight into why I made the inflatable cabin cruiser and how I use it. Next is the nitty-gritty part of how I made it. Obviously the frame is the backbone of the boat tent, and is the reason it's so easy to erect. When travelling, the main frame bridges the gap between the bow canopy and the console. It's firmly secured to the canopy with ropes so that neither movement nor waves can displace it. The rear of the frame is also secured to the console using plastic handles I recycled from my last inflatable boat. This photo shows the front fixing, including the red rope which stops the frame from sliding forward. This setup allows the frame to hinge into its erect position when I want to put the tent up. To raise the main frame, a smaller subframe is placed in the console, and the ropes hold the complete frame assembly very securely to the boat to prevent winds from blowing the tent cover off. As mentioned earlier, the rear frame is always open to allow good ventilation, but it is covered with a bug net in case midges find me. In this photo it is worth pointing out the stoppers that resemble red draft excluders. One can be seen under the frame front and the other across the rear edge of the canopy. This prevents rain and spray being blown under the tent cover and into the boat when travelling. Under the very front and sides of the bow canopy are similar stops to prevent water coming in between the PVC tube and the canopy. They are made from soft packaging foam covered with some spare tent cover material, and it all works well. Everything is easily removed completely from the boat when I don't want the tent, as there is no permanent fixtures. I am a great believer in recycling 3 materials, and used a camping chair that had been abandoned by someone's camping holiday up below. I cut the canvas off and used the metal legs, breezing bits together to make the frame, also using some scrap wood I had left from previous projects. Nothing went to waste either. The canvas seat material was used to make a strong camera bag for my video camera. Needless to say, the camera fits perfectly. The bag is padded and it's shower-proof too. I confess the frame did look a little rough and ready, assembled from several brazed bits of metal. So to tidy it up, I put it inside some half-inch plastic water pipe, and to my eyes it looks good. In case you're wondering how the tent cover is fitted to the frame, I use webbing with Velcro pads on it. So the webbing basically clips around the frame, but more on that shortly. Having designed the boat tent on paper and made the frame, my next step before spending any money in the tent itself was I made a prototype out of an old plastic tarpaulin. This meant I could try out the idea, and if it didn't work, well, it only cost so far was my time, and I enjoyed that. The other benefit of the prototype is it made a template to cut the final material to shape. I spent 2 nights in the prototype sleeping up the law, and it was that successful I had no hesitation in buying some decent material. I researched materials for the tent, but I also had specific qualities in mind. I wanted a heavy material so it wouldn't rustle in the wind and keep me awake at night. It had to be strong and seawater resistant too, as I envisaged salt spray constantly soaking it. It had to be easy to work with, and it also had to be flexible enough for my home sewing machine. Breathable material was tempting, but I excluded it because it's mostly thin and the edges could fray easy if I didn't sew hems on every edge, which is a lot of work. I also felt, rightly or wrongly, salt water drying on it could soon reduce its breathability. Oh, and finally, breathable material of any quality is expensive. So I decided on 230 grams per square metre polyester material as shown. It's £12 per metre for a roll width of 1.5 metres, and I calculated I needed 4 metres, so less than £50, and I was happy. Polyester material is easy to cut, then run a hot knife or soldering iron along its edge and the polyester melts slightly so it won't fray. A big plus for me. And last but certainly not least, although I was going to sew it, it can also be successfully glued using Aquaseal glue or other suitable tent seam sealer. Aquaseal makes life very easy when gluing in windows, etc., and it's a totally waterproof and strong seal. As can be seen in this photo, the actual tent shape is very simple. Almost a large triangle with one tip cut off to fit the front of the boat. I had to have a join in the material which runs the full length of the tent and is seen running down the front. I stitched this seam in the sewing machine, then glued a wide strip of material along the length of the seam, making it totally waterproof. There are no other cuts in the tent apart from the windows. I find the windows are essential, as when I'm moored offshore at night, I like to make sure I'm not dragging anchor by looking out the window at land every time that I awaken. I have added another window to the other side of the tent since these photos were taken. The tent material is secured to the frame with Velcro strips, which are strong enough as the elastic clips and the rubbing straight take the strain of the tent when it's underway or a wind is blowing. I fixed the Velcro to short pieces of webbing, which was then sewn onto pads. I then glued the pads onto the actual tent so there's no cuts or stitching in the outer tent material. As mentioned earlier, I sealed all the cut edges with a hot soldering iron so that they can't fray. I then folded the material and ran a line of stitching along each length, before inserting a length of rope into the channel formed by the stitching. This gives the tent edges a very strong and professional look. And that hopefully covers and answers any questions on how I made the tent. To end this video, it's worth pointing out that on my multi-day trips, I still take a conventional land tent, and I actually prefer to use it if there is a nice flat piece of meadow grass to pitch it on. I get a far better night's sleep in a conventional tent, and there is more room, so I'm not worried about dropping anything overboard. However, the boat tent comes into its own when there are no flat, short grassed areas to pitch the tent. I no longer worry about where I'm going to sleep, as there are lots of sheltered places to moor up in, whereas there are not so many flat pieces of grass about, especially where there are no cows to trample on me. I still have to carry everything ashore, even when boat tenting, as I eat and land and exercise my legs and land. I'm looking forward to a long, warm summer of multi-day adventures in both the boat tent and the land tent. I hope that gives a good insight into my inflatable cabin cruiser, and thanks for watching.